Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and this video is going to show the fastest fully upgraded vehicles in the GTA Online Tuners class in terms of lap time. As always, the position counter is in the top left with the best lap time the vehicle achieved in the top right, and since Tuners is a subclass rather than a full-fledged one, the positions within their own proper classes are also listed in the top left. This video only focuses on track performance, so if you're interested in top speed where braking, cornering and acceleration aren't relevant, check the link in the description for the top speed testing series, and if you want to know more information about this testing, including the extent to which it's accurate and how useful it is for you personally, have a read of the full description as everything that you need is in there. This video lists all vehicles and is correct as of the Los Santos Tuners update. For any tuners added after that or other classes of cars, check the playlist linked in the second line of the description, and feel free to check out my Patreon or become a YouTube member if you want to support this work and get testing results of any new cars a little bit early. So yeah, I figured that since we've now had all 17 cars from the Tuners DLC, including the 10 that were originally released and then the 7 that have been released as drip feed content over the following weeks, it was worth making new videos that bring all of the cars together. This is obviously the lap time video, and I'll be doing the same for the top speeds of these cars as well. Now interestingly, the bottom 6 are actually the same as the original bottom 6 when the first 10 cars were released, with most of the drip feed cars putting themselves into the top half of the overall list. So basically that means that we got the majority of all the slower cars first up on day 1 of the DLC. Some notable cars that we're going to be seeing straight away are the Previan here, for example, which takes the top spot from the Zion for the Coupes class and is the first brand new coupe added to the game in 5 years, and also the Dominator ASP, which gets exactly the same lap time as the Previan but has a higher top speed. That's why it gets the 10th place over the Previan's 11th, which takes the top spot for the Muscle class. So Muscle and Coupes both have cars at the very top of their classes that have exactly the same lap time, which is kind of crazy. Now the Tailgater S also does pretty good in sedans, coming into 2nd place and probably able to beat the Shafter V12 on a more tight, twisty, corner heavy circuit, but still only 2nd place around the lap. And then when it comes to the rest of the cars in this list, the top 8 are all in the Sport class. So most of the cars actually from this DLC were in the Sport class. 12 of them were all Sport cars. There were 2 muscle cars, which we've seen with the 2 Dominators, which are actually the top 2 muscle cars now. We also had the single coupe of the Previan, and the 2 sedans of the Tailgater S, and the slowest vehicle of all from this DLC, the Warrener HKR, which you'd never want to use in a race, whether it's a sedans race or a tuners class race. So yeah, I don't see why they couldn't have just made tuners its own class, to be honest. You know, they could have also taken some old cars and put them in a tuners class, like Elegy Retro Custom and all these kind of cars. But hey, this is Rockstar, and what we're left with is a subclass of tuners that basically means that you can use all of these cars in the same race, even though they're in different classes. All you got to do is set it to tuners, but ultimately they're all in their own classes, and the top few are basically all sports cars. So yeah, the Jester RR is the first one in the top 5 in 5th place. Just a little bit off the pace of the top 4, and it's really the top 4 that kind of set themselves apart from the rest. Now keep in mind that the likely use case of these cars is going to be the street races that you can do from the LS car meet. Those are specifically for the tuners class, and obviously pursuit races as well, but you can also use these cars with the tuners class or just in sports class races or muscle class races on any race, as we've been doing, you know, all through the years. So yeah, top 4 are kind of setting themselves apart from the rest. As we saw, the Jester RR had a lap time of approximately a 1 minute 4 point something or other, a low 1 minute 4, and then we've immediately gone to a low 1 minute 3 with the Growler in 4th place. And the top 4 are so close together that they're actually really close in terms of their positions within sports. The sports class has nearly 90 cars now, it's absolutely ridiculous. But in 3rd place for tuners, we've got the Calico GTF, which is about a 10th of a second quicker than the Growler, and only 2 places higher than it in the sports class as a whole. And we're not even gonna, none of the cars here even break into the top 10 for the sports class, but these are the ones for tuner races. So the way that the top 4 work is that they all have different positives and negatives around any given lap, and some tracks will suit some cars more than others. Ultimately, the top 2 kind of eke out a little bit more of a gap, to be honest, than the rest of the top 4, but really you can use any of the top 4 and be competitive with them. So in second place, ahead of the Calico and the first car to beat the Calico when it came to the drip feed content, because the Calico was the number 1 when we first got obviously all the original cars with the DLC, is the Vector, and it's the first one that breaks that 1:3 barrier, going about 0.2 of a second quicker than the Calico. It's a monster in the corners. It's in 13th place for the sports class. Really solid car, the Vector. But again, it does have some weaknesses, which I am going to talk about. But all of the basically 4th, 3rd and 2nd place cars all have weaknesses. The 1st place car doesn't really have any weaknesses, but it also doesn't have any major strength. So our number 1 car is of course the Sultan RS Classic. It goes about 0.2 of a second per lap quicker than what we saw from the Vector with a 1:2.7. It's only a 1/10 of a second slower than the regular Sultan Classic that isn't in the tuners class. And it's 12th place in sports. So it's a very competent car, and all 4 of the top 4 are all competent cars as well. We will see a comparison between the top 2 of the Sultan RS Classic and the Vector, and you'll see how the Vector does a lot better in the corners while the Sultan catches back up on the straights, highlighting how more corner heavy tracks will suit the Vector over the Sultan. And that's the same story across the top 4, to be honest. They've all got their own little individual quirks. The Growler in 4th place has a tendency to oversteer, while the Calico in 3rd has a lot of understeer. The top 2 are more balanced in that respect, but the Sultan is the least consistent. The Vector is the best in the corners but suffers in straight line speed, while the Calico dominates on acceleration but suffers in the corners. The Growler is the best out of the top 4 for top speed, but not as good on acceleration. And the Sultan RS Classic is the jack of all trades car that's good enough on all of those metrics to be the top dog overall, but is the least consistent and the most difficult to drive to the limit of its capabilities, especially on bumpy circuits where it has a tendency to, snap on you, and it's also quite light, so going up against other people with contact isn't always the best case for the Sultan RS Classic. In that same vein, the Vector requires the most knowledge of racing lines and general driving skill to maximise the grip in the corners, while the Calico is the opposite. Its really good acceleration allows lower skilled drivers to not really have to worry about maximising speed around the corners as much. Ultimately, different tracks will suit the top 4 cars differently. On some tracks the Sultan RS will be the best, on others the Vector, and so on. But honestly, you can choose whichever car from the top 4 that you personally perform the best with, and you'll know that if you lose a race, it's most likely because it was a better driver behind the wheel of a different car, rather than being off the pace in a slower car, and the same can't be said for any of the other cars in the tuners class. While it is a shame that in a brand new subclass of 17 cars, we only have 4 that are on the very top pace, having 4 in the first place is kind of a miracle given Rockstar's usual balancing efforts, where there's always just one car at the top of a class that's the best. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you've enjoyed, and it's been nice to see a culmination of all the cars and see them all from last to first. And yeah, the top 4, basically just choose whichever one you like the most, because that's what's going to do you the best. Consider supporting on Patreon or become a YouTube member if you want testing results early, and remember to read the description for more info, comment with your thoughts, like the video if you enjoyed or found it helpful, and subscribe for more. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.